Hello, fellow griever. We are down the rabbit hole where we talk honestly about what happens after survival, after the world moves on, and after grief changes shape. I'm Melissa, your host, and today we're going a little deeper together. Welcome. Over the last few rabbit hole episodes, we have been talking about the longer road of grief after the loss of a child by suicide. We've talked about survival, hope, healing, and then what? We've talked about identity and the painful questions so many moms eventually come to. Who am I now? We've talked about legacy and what it means to carry love forward. And today I want to talk about something that sits underneath so much of that rebuilding work, but I don't think we name it nearly enough or clearly enough. Self-trust. Now, this is also a good place to pause and say that if you haven't listened to those past episodes I talked about, they're worth going back to, especially if you find yourself living in this now wet space in the years beyond survival, and you're just finding us today. This season is all about life in the longer term after. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to dip back into the earlier grief years, because we are, and I have plenty of spaces to support that work as well. And listening to what may be coming down the road is also its own version of healing and hope in the early days. But that's where we are. Today, we're at self-trust. Or maybe more honestly, what happens when you stop trusting yourself. Because after the loss of a child by suicide, many moms do not only grieve their child. We begin questioning ourselves at the deepest possible level. I know I did. And not just for our choices, not just for the things we did or didn't do, but like ourselves at our core, our instincts and judgment. I know I questioned a lot of my memories. I definitely questioned my motherhood, our ability to know what is true and believe we were ever good mothers at all. And that's what I want to sit with for a little bit today. Not the early grief version of guilt exactly, not that raw, immediate, shock-filled guilt that hits those first days, weeks, and months after the suicide loss. That guilt is real. And that guilt is super brutal. But today I want to talk more about what happens later. What happens when guilt doesn't exactly leave, but instead starts becoming a part of that background noise of our life. What happens when the shame-blame game is no longer only about death itself, but begins reaching backward into everything you ever did as a mom. Because one of the cruelest things suicide loss can do is this. Suicide loss takes a lifetime of love and filters it through our worst day. I'm going to say that again. Suicide loss takes a lifetime of love and filters it through our one worst day. And if we're not careful, or if we don't have the language, support, or space to really examine that, we can start believing the filtered version is the whole truth. But it's not. So today, what I want to do is talk about what it means to begin trusting yourself again after the loss of a child by suicide. And I want to say right up front, this is not quick work, and it's definitely not easy work. And it's not just about talking to yourself out of grief. It is about slowly learning to have kinder, more truthful relationship with yourself inside of your grief. Because self-trust is directly tied to our self-worth. It's tied to self-esteem. It's tied to self-love. Even if that phrase feels a little too soft or fluffy for some people. I'm kind of one of those people. but I can recognize those other things. And after this kind of loss, all of those things feel shattered. Most of us expect the grief. Of course, we know we'll miss our kid. We expect the longing, and I think we even expect the guilt and the shame, the replaying of memories, the replaying of other things, the hypervigilance, the sleeplessness, the too much hunger or not enough hunger, the trauma responses that we have. We know the what ifs are probably coming. All those what if I had called, and what if I had said something different or gone there or understood that or known this. All of those we kind of expect. But what I don't think most of us prepare ourselves for is the way we stop trusting ourselves altogether. Before Alex died, if someone had asked me for mothering advice, I probably would have given it to them. Not because I thought I was like the perfect mother, but because I thought I had figured out, some things. Maybe not the magical formula for parenting, but because I did believe I was a good mom and had something to offer. I believed I knew my children. I believed I had instincts that I could trust. I thought I had a little bit of, hard-won wisdom that I could maybe, teach others. But after Alex left, if someone asked me for mothering advice, my internal response would have been something closer to, don't ask me. I obviously don't know what I'm doing. And that's now brutal to say out loud. But I also know there's mothers listening who understand exactly what I mean. You probably shook your head. You probably felt it in your core. Because when your child dies by suicide, the grieving brain does not only ask, how did this happen? It asks, how did I not know? And underneath that questioning is something a lot heavier, fellow grievers. How could I have thought I was a good mother if this happened? How could I trust myself again when I missed something this important? How can I ever believe my own instincts are right again? Those questions do not stay neatly contained. They actually kind of spread. They begin touching old conversations, old decisions and memories, moments when you were tired, moments when you were distracted, maybe when you were angry, those less than perfect moments when you were human. And suddenly your grieving brain is reviewing your entire motherhood through the lens of that worst day. This is not truth. That's trauma. But it can feel like the truth. And that's where I think so many moms get stuck in the longer years. Because in the beginning, guilt may feel loud and sharp and like immediate. It's there. Later, it can get a little quieter. It can become less like a wave that knocks you over and more like air that you're breathing without even knowing it. It may show up in a way that you second guess every decision. You no longer feel like that self-assured person who can just decide something and you really don't know why. In a way that you maybe hesitate before giving someone advice or back off from it altogether. In a way that maybe you can't quite relax when life is calm. It may show up in a way that you overcheck on your other children or apologize constantly for things or feel responsible for everyone else's emotional state. It may not announce itself directly as guilt anymore. It may simply feel like, I don't trust me. And one thing I want to say loudly and clearly today is guilt is not the same thing as truth. And I know that can be hard to hear. And I know for some mothers, it may even feel impossible to believe, especially if there was an argument or if there were words said, especially if there was a moment that you've replayed 1,000 times, or if you believe that something you did or didn't do somehow contributed to what happened. I'm not here to argue you out of your grief. It's yours. And I'm not here to slap some pretty affirmation or platitude over the worst pain of your life. I don't do that. I understand this pain. I've been living it for almost a decade. But, or maybe I should say I do want to genuinely, gently make room for the possibility that guilt is not always evidence. Sometimes guilt is our brain trying to create order after something unimaginable. This is unimaginable. And sometimes guilt feels like love. It might feel like accountability. It might feel like staying connected. And sometimes guilt is trauma trying to create a story that it can somehow survive. Because if I caused it, then maybe the world is not as random. If I should have stopped it, then maybe control was possible. If I can find the exact mistake, then maybe I can make sense of the unimaginable. See how these things can play through our mind? But just because a brain tells a story doesn't mean the story is fully true. I know that's a hard concept. And it's true. And this is where we begin to separate responsibility from control. And I know we're in delicate territory, and I'm going to try to say all this in a way that's really easy to follow. Mothers are wired to protect. From the moment our children enter our lives, we are watching, listening, scanning for danger, trying to keep them safe. And for most of us, so much of our identity gets tied up into that. Being a good mother, being protective and present and tuned in, being the one who knows all the things. So when our child dies by suicide, especially if they were an older teenager or a younger adult, something in us still says, I should have been able to prevent this. I should have known. I should have stopped it. I should have been enough. And I want to say something here that may be uncomfortable, but I go there because I think it matters to go there. I do think this is kind of ego that's involved in this. And I don't mean ego as in arrogance. I do not mean ego as vanity in the way we would usually use the word. I mean ego as identity. Think back to a psychology class and Freudian references to ego. The part of us that built a sense of self around being their mother, around protecting them, around knowing them, around believing our love could somehow keep them safe. When that belief is shattered, the mother self can feel completely shattered too. That does not mean we're vain in some awful or judgmental way. It means we're human. It means we love them with everything we had. It means we believed motherhood gave us more control than any human being actually has over another person's inner world. And that, fellow grievers, is one of the hardest truths to accept. Because as mothers, we do carry a lot of influence. We do guide them a lot. I'd like to think we shape them a little at least, right? We provide safety and structure and values and love and support and sometimes accountability. Nurture matters. Of course it does. But we don't create another human being from scratch. We do not control every road they take. We do not know every thought they have. And there's no way for us to see all the hidden places inside of them. And believe it or not, we don't have full control over their wiring, their chemistry, their pain, the impulses, their choices, even their private inner world they may not have been able to share with us. Sometimes they don't know how to get into that completely themselves. That doesn't make the loss less devastating. And it doesn't make our grief any cleaner, or that doesn't make the questions go away. But it matters when we're trying to rebuild our self-trust. Because if we keep believing being a good mother meant having total control, then we'll never be able to see ourselves truthfully again. We will only see ourselves through the lens of what we couldn't control. And that's not fair. And it's definitely not the whole truth. The longer I live and the more I look at my own children and the children of people I love, the more I believe we come into this world with so much already woven into us. Yes, I think we influence and teach and we model and we guide. And possibly, we shape the roads they know how to drive on. I'm using drive metaphorically there. We may influence the language they use and some of the values they carry, the beliefs they question or embrace, and maybe the way they understand love and safety and family. But who they are at their core, I think so much of that arrives with them. And if you have more than one child, you've seen this several times over in how different they can present, even if they were only a year or two apart in age. Same parents, same house, same general environment, completely different humans. And even if you only have one child, you've probably seen others with multiple children to understand the unique gravity of this. So many different temperaments and sensitivities. It's different wiring. It's different ways of seeing and moving through the world that we all have. And I don't want to negate nurture. I don't want to say that it doesn't matter. But it means nurture is not omnipotent. And I think that distinction matters when we're trying to sort through this. Because after suicide loss, many mothers unconsciously or subconsciously believe, if I had mothered perfectly, this could not have happened. But perfect mothering does not exist. Because perfect humaning does not exist. And even if it did, whatever that would mean, it would not give us total control over another human being's pain. And that is not an easy truth for a mother to swallow. It is not a comforting truth. Exactly. I mean, it kind of is if you dig in a little bit. But over time, it can become a more freeing truth. That's how it felt to me when I settled into that place. Because it creates just enough space for a mother to begin saying, maybe I didn't know what I didn't know. Maybe I loved deeply and I still could not see everything. Maybe I was responsible for loving, guiding, supporting, and showing up. And yet maybe I was not responsible for controlling every hidden part of another human being's inner life. And maybe not being able to save them doesn't mean I was not a good mother. Not being able to save them does not mean you were not a good mother. This is a sentence many mothers need to hear more than once. Some of you are not ready to believe it, and that's okay. You don't have to be forced a belief. Sometimes healing begins by simply allowing a sentence to sit nearby, not accepting it fully or even claiming it yet, just letting it exist somewhere in your room. Because the shame-blame game came in very loud, and it can stay loud for a while. And it doesn't always sound like shame. Sometimes it sounds like responsibility or devotion. Sometimes it says things like, a good mother would carry this pain forever. Sometimes it says, if I stop blaming myself, I'm letting myself off the hook. Sometimes it says, if I forgive myself, I'm saying what happened was okay. And no. I mean, no, 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 no. That is not what it means. Rebuilding self-trust doesn't mean deciding that the loss was okay. It doesn't mean forgetting or minimizing. It doesn't mean pretending there were no complicated moments. And it doesn't mean that denying that there were things that you wish had been different. What it might mean is refusing to let the worst day become the only narrator of your entire motherhood journey. It means slowly allowing yourself to learn to tell a bigger, broader truth, a more whole truth, a truth that includes things like your mistakes, because remember that humanness, right? A truth that includes their pain, because of course they had an inner life. And a truth that also includes your love and effort, all that exhaustion, all the limits you pushed, all the times that you were present, you're trying, you're showing up. A truth that includes the entire life, not only the death. Because again, suicide loss takes a lifetime of love and filters it through the worst day. And part of rebuilding self-trust is learning to remove that filter little by little, enough to see more clearly. You're not going to suddenly see more perfectly, but hopefully a little more truthfully. And I also briefly want to talk about how quietly self-trust can break. Because sometimes we expect healing work to be like obvious, like this is what I'm supposed to do next. We expect big emotions and big meltdowns and big anniversaries and big activators. But a loss of self-trust may show up in much, much smaller ways. You may find yourself unable to make simple decisions. That happened to me all the time. And I couldn't even explain why I could no longer decide anything. You may need reassurance for things you used to handle without thinking twice. You may find yourself anxious when the phone rings. You may overthink every text from your other children. You may not trust calm when it does show up because calm feels like the thing that came before the storm. You know, life was great, life was fine. Yes, there may have been a few troubles, but compared to now, it was the calm, right? You may not trust joy at all because joy now feels dangerous. How can we afford to be joyous, right? Look what happens when we're joyous. And honestly, it makes sense from a psychological standpoint. The nervous system learned that life can change in a single instant. That when everything changed, it changed everything. Your body learned that unimaginable pain is possible. I always used to say, if this could happen, anything could happen. Your brain learned to scan backward and forward for danger. So no, this is not just me telling you to fix your mindset. This is so far beyond that. This is something we fix or rather, this is something we don't fix by telling ourselves to just stop feeling guilty. Our body has to learn safety again. Our nervous system has to learn that not every quiet moment is dangerous. And we can't shame ourselves out of that, or into it for that matter. You cannot shame your nervous system into feeling safe. And that's why self-trust has to be rebuilt gently and slowly through personal relationship and truth and small choices. Through learning to listen to ourselves again without letting guilt be the only voice in the room. And I think this distinction matters too. Trusting ourselves again doesn't mean trusting life completely. After child loss, the idea of trusting life may feel impossible. It can even feel offensive to some people. So I want to be clear, I'm not asking you to pretend the world is safe. And I'm not asking you to believe nothing bad will ever happen again, because we know that that may not be true. I'm not asking you to become naive. And goodness knows, carefree went out the door when they left. But self-trust after loss can show up in smaller ways than that, and maybe more honest than that. It's the ability to pause and ask, what do I actually need right now? It's noticing when guilt is speaking and not automatically handing guilt the microphone. It's asking, is this mine to carry? It's making one small decision and letting that decision stand. It's learning that you can love deeply and still not control everything. It's something like that you can survive hard feelings without abandoning yourself. Self-trust after loss is not about believing life will never hurt you again. It's about believing you can stay with yourself when life is hard. That's a heck of a concept. I know. This is work. Not becoming untouchable or fearless, and definitely not, I'm not asking you or telling you you can become the old you, because they're gone. But learning that the you who exists now is still worthy of being trusted. And I know we're worth being loved too, but we got to get to trust first. That rebuilding, my friends, may happen in very small ways. And over time, all of those small ways matter. An honest yes or an honest no. A moment where you say, I did not know what I did not know. One moment where you allow someone to trust to reflect back a truth you cannot yet hold yourself. One moment where you remember something loving you did as a mother and allow that to count. No second guessing, just allow it to be. That last part matters, because after suicide loss, we become very good at counting everything we think we did wrong. We count the missed signs, the conversations we regret, the words we wish we hadn't said, or the ones we wish we had said differently. We count the moments we now believe should have meant more than they did at the time. But oh my gosh, love has evidence too. The rides count, the meals and the late nights and the laughter. All the rides to appointments and the ordinary everyday conversations, the times you showed up again and again and again and again count. If grief gets to bring evidence, love gets to bring evidence too. That doesn't erase the pain, I know, but it makes our story more honest. And that is part of learning to trust yourself again, the not pretending. not softening the loss into something it's not, but refusing to let guilt be the only historian of your own motherhood. That is exactly why this topic made its way into the bridge sessions. Because once survival is no longer the only goal, we have to begin looking at the deeper things grief damaged. Deeper things like identity, self-trust, like we're talking about today, self-worth, the relationship we have with others, the way we carry guilt, the way we understand motherhood now, the way we begin living forward without letting shame make every decision. So inside my monthly free offering called the Bridge Sessions inside the Rebuilding Room, we are moving into this very question. What does it mean to learn to trust ourselves after child loss? We're not doing it in a rushed way, not in a way that tries to talk mothers out of their grief, not in a way that says, just forgive yourself and move on, because I would never do that, but in a real and careful way, a way that honors both the depth of the loss and the truth of the mothers who are still allowed to have a compassionate relationship with themselves. Because you aren't broken because you question yourself. And you're not failing because you still carry guilt. And you're not weak because your nervous system is exhausted. You are a mother who loved deeply, lost dramatically, and is trying to learn how to live in a world that no longer feels safe or whole or predictable. And that takes time. We need so much space and grace in this journey. So if you're listening today and you don't trust yourself anymore, I want you to hear me. You're not alone. You're not beyond repair. This may be a part of your rebuilding, a painful part, definitely an under-talked about part, but not an impossible part. But I will say that learning to trust ourselves again is vital, and it doesn't mean forgetting them or what happened. And it definitely doesn't mean denying your grief or pretending you have no questions. It means allowing your love to count and allowing your humanity to exist. It means little by little learning to stand beside yourself again instead of only standing against yourself. If you're a grieving mother and you are in an earlier survival space, I'll include the link in the show notes to the You Are Not Alone Mom's free monthly support gathering for mothers navigating child loss after suicide. But if you're beginning to ask the deeper now what question, the who am I now, how do I carry this, how do I rebuild or trust myself again, I'll also include the link to the bridge sessions inside the Rebuilding Room, because that's my free monthly guided gathering for grieving moms learning how to live forward after this loss. And I want you to hopefully go on and read about it if it even sparks an interest, because we do have ongoing connection between monthly Zoom sessions if you choose to use it. You, of course, do not have to. There's no requirements. It's a free monthly offering, but it is meant to build month after month. And before you go, if this episode had resonated with you, please follow the show so you don't miss future episodes. And if your podcast player allows you to, and you haven't before, please like, rate, and review. Or more importantly, share this episode with another grieving person who may need it, because that helps the leftover pieces reach more people who are learning how to live after loss, and that's important. I get nothing from it except knowing that someone else could be helped. I appreciate that more than you know. And I want to leave you with this today. Learning to trust yourself again doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means remembering that you are still worthy of your own compassion. Because, my friend, you are. Talk soon.